Hello and welcome to Masquerade Breach, Season 2, Episode 2. I'm Blazewing.
I'm Catherine Cosplays, or Krisha.
And Marley.
And I'm Ocean, also known as Cam.
We're talking about Renfield today, which was absolutely mind-boggling for a movie, I think. We don't really have any socials set up yet, but if you'd like to come and watch movies with us on Wednesday, find one of our hosts somewhere, and we'll be able to give you an invite link to come and join us on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Time for watch parties and whatnot. This season, the rest of the season brings you Episode 3, which will be hopefully next week, is Fright Night. Episode 4 is Once Bitten. Episode 5 is Vampire's Assistant. Episode 6, Hotel Transylvania. Episode 7, Dracula the Dark Prince. Episode 8, Daybreakers. And Episode 9 for Season 2 is Perfect Creature. And then we sit down and start planning Season 3, which I'm excited that this is like a whole thing, not gonna lie.
Been something that we've been planning for months.
That being said, guys, I have my unfiltered, no context notes. So, the way I take notes, I sit down and I write my notes as we're going through the movie, just whatever goes through my mind. Has maybe no relevance to the movie, has maybe all of the relevance to the movie. Enjoy these in no particular order. Starting with the abuser's support group. Fitting. Bug eating gives powers? The survival nuts should be happy about that. Dracula's newest trick, dealing with a priest the best way, exploding from the inside out. Quote, I swallowed a bug. Unintentionally. Nice. Not sus at all. Renfield gets Dracula's victims by going after abusers? And that's a problem how? Rude, what did that dog ever do to you? Dracula is an equal opportunity eater. No pay discrepancy and wage gap here. I'll bet you that bodyguard sings great bass. Renfield's got fucking moves! Apparently, the Iraq War is three out of 5 stars. I'd like to know what 5 out of 5 is. Quote, I'm Teddy fucking Lobo. I'm Count Dracula. You win. Best line ever. Say what you want, but Cage was so good in this role. I want murder cookies. Now that is how you kick the shit out of someone. Tumblr saves the day. Who would have thought? So, let's open up now that that's over with. What did you guys think? Let's start with Marley.
Absolutely love this movie. It is one of my top 10 favorites of all time because it fits my sense of humor so well. Just every single scene had something you could poke at. Like every single piece of it was something that made no sense, but all the sense at the same time, which is how my brain works. So I absolutely 100% love this movie.
Catherine Cosplays, you're next.
Oh my god. This movie, just everything about it was delectable. I'm just gonna start off with Nicolas Cage, who I think took a how many years break from acting for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is what he comes back as a leather trench coat wearing badass also that. And also I have to give him such props. I can't even talk correctly with two scarecrow fangs in my mouth. He had the false teeth the whole time, and there were some scenes where you could really see he was struggling with them, but also to the practical effects, where they use CGI and practical effects so expertly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my favorite part about this entire movie was just the creativity with the action sequences. Like the fact that Dracula turned into mist, went into a priest's lungs, and then fucking exploded. That is crazy. Like even like the first like that whole fight scene was a fucking montage of like, so here we are. This is how we got here. Like so expertly done. The like narcissism abuse talk, I thought that was just niche. I wasn't ready for this to be like a wait a minute, this movie is actually pretty like profound and like spot on when it comes to that. Like the scene where Dracula was in Renfield's like new apartment,
Mm-hmm.
that scene, oh, that hit me so hard. I was not ready for how hard that was gonna hit. It just all around. I still laugh at he won't rise to full power. Yes! Why would you phrase it like that? But yes, he won't rise to full power. Like it's it is such a treasure of a film, honestly. Like, and I'm just gonna say it as someone who is such like I have 20 versions of Dracula on my shelf right now. I think when we actually read the book Dracula, I'm just the whole podcast is just me gotta be me going off. But it was so true to like the true spirit of Dracula. Such a good thing. It gave Renfield like an actual story arc when he's really just a plot device in the
Mm-hmm.
book. I'm so like it's so sweet. You're never bored. There's always something. The pacing is great. Yeah, I loved it.
Ocean.
So there's a soft spot for me when regards to any Nicolas Cage movie. It has to be dramatic and over the top. It has to be that crescendo of like placing on stage theater into movie form.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with any role that Nicolas Cage has ever done. If you look back to even Con Air from um oh what's from The Wicker Man you know to the movie where he thinks he is a vampire to now, which I think the throwback of him thinking he's a vampire with the fake teeth and they're fake. I think that's what a lot of that lisp was, in the aspect of when you could tell he was wearing those things, like what Krisha was saying. I think that was a throwback, a very subtle throwback to that role, quite a bit. One of the things that really stood out for me was that this was a Renfield movie. This was not a Dracula movie. This was absolutely a point of from the perspective of some ghoul living in such a way that he has to make they have to move constantly, and it was just so unique in its production. I have to give a shout out to the costuming that went into that. It was amazing to watch. All of this was just it was a good movie. It really was, from beginning to end. It had nonstop action. It had dialogue. It had comedy. It was uh, it was riveting throughout the entire thing. Not a dull moment.
Not gonna lie, one of the big things for me about this was the costuming and practical effects. Again, much like the other movie we did, Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows. Yeah.
You guys know I'm a sucker for costuming. I wish I had talent to do costuming properly. I wish I had the resources to do costuming properly. And I wish I had like half decent makeup skills when it comes to stuff like that. But I am a sucker for practical effects and costuming. That in your set, if your costuming, your practical effects in your set are done beautifully, there's a very good chance I may just say, screw the story. I don't care about the story. I'm just here for the fucking vibes. For me, through and through, I do think it was very much the vibes for this movie. That being said, it did kind of land on its own 2 feet. I really feel, even though they're pulling off of well-established lore, like one of the oldest vampire stories we have at the moment, it still managed to land on its feet and find its own stride. It injected its own sort of sense of humor. It gave its own atmosphere, I think is the word I'm going for.
Yeah.
Its own energy without
Yeah.
treading too much on the Dracula. What about you guys? Riley?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely love the fact that they took so many aspects of what we know for vampire lore and just made it over the top. So, like, superhuman strength all over the place. And it was to the point where, like, it was ridiculous, but also it fits. And that's what I love is that it's so ridiculous. Every single piece of it was absolutely ridiculous, but I loved every moment because it's the lore, but so over the top that you can't help but love it.
Catherine?
It's just like that classic like vampire just like seduction, like they draw you in to get their fill, which like has been used to like compare to other individuals other than just like fictional vampires and real people, and that just came right in. um it just like once I feel like that opening scene that set the tone. Like this is we're gonna be goofy and there's gonna be comedy, but also this is do not like this is also a thriller. This is also gonna be a lot. Um, the ending, like start end. They made concrete cubes with his ashes
Mm-hmm.
and holy water
Mm-hmm.
to and then for Lee movies, there is no end to Dracula. He's
Mm-hmm.
always gonna come back.
He's a timeless classic.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's so like, and I love how they left it open ended, where Renfield was like, I don't know how long this will hold him, but I think we'll have a good amount of time. And then like there's like the sweet tea bottle of Dracula blood just chilling just chilling on the snack table
Support group?
at the support group. And then like I love the fact that like we see him at multiple of these sessions and he's really trying to explain like he's trying to explain it, but he can't say like, "Oh, this is a vampire and I have murdered a lot of people." Until finally the end where they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, you did great. Thank you for bringing us back to life." Um
Thank,
just it's so great. It's such a vibe.
Thanks for bringing us back to life. Even though we've all seen things we can't unseen, and now we have to live with that forever. Just kind of trails off.
It was very Kill Bill. Did
Yeah,
anyone else feel that vibe? Very Kill Bill.
I've never seen.
It's it does have kind of the gratuitous violence of Kill Bill, but it has far more comedy than Kill Bill.
Yeah.
Ocean, your turn.
So some things that really kind of brought me into this, aside from it being a vampire movie, is this is not a vampire movie. This is a ghoul movie. It is not it is not showcasing vampirism. It's showing what happens when you have vampiric powers in a mortal
Mm-hmm.
and what it does. I think that that stands out in of itself of what happens and kind of it shows you a bit of the consequences of running from consequences constantly and what that relationship, that dynamic between vampire and ghoul really is. Some things that really kind of brought this home was that the ghoul is not some weak mortal. He is now imbued with powers of the vampire, which in of itself you'd think, oh, this guy's super powerful, but there's limitations to said power and the ability to watch how the dynamic between him and other mortals are versus him and Dracula is it's one of those things that kind of bring you to understand that he's kind of caught between two worlds. And being caught between those two worlds, one is very delusional, toxic, and narcissistic. The other is very much the humanity that he fights with. And I think that brings to the point where it's like at one point it could be considered a DS relationship if we were really to get into it. A very toxic, uncommunicative one at that. Um, and it goes and it kind of shows you the pitfalls of what, uh, what comes with power also comes with great responsibility, great power responsibility type thing. And just the fact that Dracula just walks all over that and abuses that is insane.
See, you're talking about this, and my mind's immediately flashing back to the fight between Renfield and the other guy that ended up as Dracula's bitch.
Right?
And Renfield's like trying to talk this guy down, like it's not everything you think it is. It's actually a curse. Like you don't want this. And the other guy's like, "But Master told me." Oh
Oh.
shit! Just that moment
Yeah.
of realization just stopped mid sentence. Like the entire, you just see the entire train derail.
And Renfield's like, like,
I was
oh,
there.
buddy.
I was there.
Uh, but
Yeah.
okay, this is a really niche thing that I'm gonna point out because like, I think we can give me a hat that says Queen of Tiny Niche Details.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning of the movie, Renfield is copy paper pale. His lips are gray. His like he's so incredibly like gaunt
Mm-hmm.
and skinny. And as you watch him through the film, he gets color back into his face.
Mm-hmm.
His face goes back to normal. He gains weight again, so he like doesn't look as like awful and like doesn't look as sickly, and he's like actually getting healthy, and you can literally see like as he's becoming a healthier individual mentally, it's physically manifesting. And
Mm-hmm.
literally watching that unfold through the movie, I was like, oh, this little nugget, he's getting better. Oh my god. This is like, it was so, this was the first time in I think a long time that I didn't root for the villain. Like,
Yeah.
do not get me wrong. This is like the first Dracula movie I think I've ever watched where I wasn't rooting for Dracula, which
Yeah.
is
Right.
nuts. No, that's actually nuts because like when you think like literally like Nicolas Cage, love him. This role, he was born for this role.
Yep, 100%.
Yep.
He was evil and sadistic and scary, legitimately terrifying. I have not been like terrified by a villain in forever. So this was the first Dracula movie I think I've really ever watched where like I was like, "Oh, he's fucking terrifying.
Right.
This is an evil villain who I am afraid of." And
Yep.
Mhm.
that is rare.
This
Oh,
was
I definitely was. I was rooting for the human, and that was a thing for me. I'm like, oh my goodness, am I switching sides?
well, and I think that goes into with what we're all saying was that, like, this actually showcased the realities of vampirism, and and Dracula was never meant to be someone you aspire to be. It was supposed to be like the villain, and it actually portrayed that very, very well in this movie. No matter how over the top or cheap the plastic fangs were.
Well, because Bella Lugosi had to make him look cool and hot. Like all the other iterations of Dracula before Bela Lugosi, literally it was like terrifying, monstrosity, claws, like Nosferatu. And then here comes Bela Lugosi in like a three-piece suit, and everyone was like, "Oh no, he's hot!" Like straight up. They had to make him this suave, sophisticated man where everyone just went, "Wait a minute,
I'm
hear me
sorry.
out."
I will forever die on the hill of Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman was also extremely hot,
Gary
especially with
Oldman and that
Dracula.
Victorian outfit with the fucking top hat. Like, Gary Oldman can. We're not going to finish that sentence.
Now, just remember the Count as Gary Oldman Dracula. I've crossed oceans of time. 1, 2, 3 oceans. Ah, ah, ah.
That being said, but that line is such an iconic line, though.
It really is.
I'm mad that line. They had the camera on Mina. They didn't
Hmm.
show his fucking face.
Yeah. That's.
If they had recorded his face saying that that would probably be the most rewatched like 6 seconds in like vampire media history.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yep. Marley, you were going to say
It's
something?
so good.
Yeah, I was more focused on the scene where, you know, all of the cookies happened.
Of
Oh,
course
the
you
murder
were.
cookies?
So, tell us about the cookies.
They're murder cookies.
Yes,
We don't eat murder cookies.
but I want murder cookies.
We're not supposed to eat the murder cookies. Until it's proven to not be murder cookies, then you can eat all the murder cookies you want. Because then they're only supposedly murder cookies.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Is this a euphemism? I if so, I don't get it.
I think in Marley's in Marley's situation, yes, it is. It's a euphemism.
It's allegedly.
Anything I say is probably a euphemism.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So, what else have we got for this movie? What else stood out? What else was impactful? What else kind of drew us in?
Well, there was.
The kid with the ant. Oh my gosh, that kid with the ant. He's just like all nice to him, and then all of a sudden, when he's in need, he's just like, ah. Poor kid in his ant farm.
One of the things that drove me about about the second scene regarding ants was that when he busts through the window and like is like, give me that. He's like, you're a bad man.
Man.
You're a bad man, Renfield.
But like but when Renfield is like, "Oh, they got such and such grams of protein per ant," and the kid is like, "Uh-huh," and the mom is like,
Yeah. What?
"What?" Also, Renfield's apartment entirely 60s vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
It like also he committed like the oldest trick in the book, like the simplest mistake. You don't get a welcome mat.
Yeah. Don't
Why
get
the
a
fuck did you get a welcome mat?
He wasn't thinking he would be found out.
Gotta go with the vibes. I mean, it's a 60s apartment. Gotta have the welcome mat to go with it. It's just not complete.
Right.
To be fair,
I
my Matt would probably say something along the lines of "fuck off and go away," but
Yeah, I've gotten a couple of those when delivering. One of the things that's interesting, I thought the fight scene between finding out about the abuser and going there and is like, well, there was an assassin. Are you the assassin? No, I'm so and so's friend.
Renfield running off to the support group and trying to warn everybody that Dracula's coming, that like you guys don't want to be here, and trying to get them up and out the door, and they're just like they're literally just sitting there, and then he walks in, and they're all immediately entranced with him.
Yeah, the moment he steps in.
Yeah.
And of course, the welcome in line that Renfield was just screaming no. These were parts that I absolutely enjoyed about that movie. These are the little nuances that come together where Renfield feels like he's not a part of this
Mm-hmm.
world. He's not a part of that, and all of a sudden he's slowly integrating back into being a part of that world again.
So let's take this a bit of a different direction then.
Mm-hmm.
What were the parts of this movie that you hated or that you didn't like? Let's start with Marley.
Oh, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not an easy one to answer
No, it's
because
not.
it's so off the wall. Um, okay, there was one scene that hit my personal red flag, but it doesn't make the movie itself like a bad scene. But for me, it was hard. And it was when they were both Renfield and Dracula in the apartment, and he like holds up the book and stuff, and he starts going over like what abusers are like and everything. That scene hit me really, really hard. And I like the first time I ever watched the movie, I cried at that scene because like it really broke my heart for Renfield to really have that moment. And Dracula just like pushes it aside like it's nothing. And you're like, no, but if you've been there with someone, you know that feeling. So like that moment was super personal. And I'm glad it's there because you really seriously relate to Renfield, but you also see why he navigates himself towards the human girl, because being with the supernatural was the first appeal of all of us. But then you see him have that moment where he sees the healthy relationship versus the abusive one, and he gravitates towards the healthy. But yeah, that scene in the apartment, like the first time I watched, I really did cry because like, oh, that hurt. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to slap Dracula. That
Yep.
was a
Yeah.
moment.
Yep. Just, how
Yeah.
dare you? Smack. Catherine.
To go off of what Marley was saying, like that, the exact same thing for me. I almost cried watching that scene because it just like, because like you literally are screaming in your head, like, you, Renfield, you have power. Like you don't have to take it, but he's just feeling so helpless
Mm-hmm.
and like powerless. And it's just like it perfectly showed like it this movie showed the layers of what getting out of this type of relationship looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Because like you have to regrow a spine and that takes time,
Yeah.
and it's slow and it's steady, but you get there. On a complete other note, they did not take enough time setting up the city.
Mm-hmm.
They were just like, okay, city's corrupt. Um this is the crime family. That like blah 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 blah. Like it just was kind of there. And like if they had, I don't know how they would have been able to do this, but if they were able to just take like another 5-ish, 10-ish minutes setting that up a little more. And then also like her partner being on the payroll as well, like that didn't hit. It should have, but they didn't set it up enough for it to hit. And like with how this movie is paced, it feels like there was a lot more that was on the cutting room floor that they
Mm-hmm.
had to chop. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, like the pacing is perfect and I love it, but it definitely feels like there was more that they did cut
I agree.
and they had to cut. And I feel like they should have taken, because like that crime boss mom, she was a delicious character. The actress they picked, perfect for her.
Mm-hmm.
And just like that moment where you can literally see like when Dracula like makes his like grand reveal out of the coffin, and you just watch as two monsters just start purring at each other because they
Mm-hmm.
recognize each other in each other's eyes. And Teddy's just like, okay, don't fuck my mom, please. Like it's just like, oh God, that moment, I was just like, oh my God. Like it was so well done. Like I wish there was more. That's the thing, and it feels like there was a little bit more that should have been there that I wish was.
Let's move on to Ocean. Circling back around to the topic, what was the part that you hated or didn't like about this movie?
So there's a couple. One of the things that I will echo exactly what Krisha was saying. There wasn't enough to go off. Had they showed what happened to the cop's father,
Mm-hmm.
would have been great. Would have made sense. We would have understood. But it was narrated through. You're just like your father, one of the best honest cops in the city. Blah 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 blah. It needed to be depicted. It really did. It needed to have more of the rise. One of the things is I hated Freddie Lobo. I hated him. He was not a. He was such a two-dimensional character.
Teddy?
Teddy Lobo was such a two-dimensional character. Had they given him a bit more depth, I think it would have been way better. The fact that he was singing like a choir bird and nobody was taking down notes, it was comical, but it was cheap funny,
Mm-hmm.
so it didn't really hit right for the setting of the scene. I get I get comedy can be slapstick sometimes, and I like slapstick when I'm in the setting of when it's in the setting of slapstick. But this was absolutely like on a dime, went from "I'll tell you anything" to "You're all fucked," that kind of thing. It's like, no, stopping the young little like carouser that you're trying to be, and it really kind of cheapened what happened to the cop's father in a lot of ways, because apparently he was there. We all believe that he was there because he was mentioning it, and it was so much that they could go off of, and a whole precinct being under their payroll. Really? Like, it was no. Mm-mm. It just it took me out of that particular scene. Had they left it to just Dracula, would have probably made it a little bit more understanding and a little bit more to kind of narrow in on Renfield as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But I get where they had to like team up the cop with the with Renfield. So either way, it was kind of eh. That was one or two. That was the two, and of course the connection with the mafia and Dracula was sort of understandable, but it needed more
Mm-hmm.
context.
You know what got me the most out of everything? Despite
Hmm.
everything you guys have talked about, it wasn't long enough. And what I mean by that is they could have done so much more. Again, with the setting up of the lore, a lot of the background information. They could have taken this and turned it into a mini series that I would have gladly sat and watched through, and they would have done so much more world building with it. They could have brought people in, like an entirely new generation in, from a different viewpoint than anybody else has had. Instead, they crammed it into 2 hours.
Yep. And I don't think it did it justice.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Then again,
It just
I'm also
Go
a
ahead.
sucker for a good story, like a good storyline or something that kind of draws you in that way. And if something's got a good storyline, I will sit there and I will watch it. If it's like 9, 10, 20 hours, I will watch it.
Mhm.
Just such a disservice, I think.
And I think it just had to do with probably budget.
Could have
From
been.
what it comes down to is his budget. And we all know that Nicolas Cage is a high stakes actor.
Yeah. I do think the concept. I do think the fact that they didn't make it a series was a flaw from the concept stage. They didn't build the project around it being a series. If they had done that, they would have had a gold mine.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to talk about for this?
Well, let's just go over the top with it. I mean, let's Nicolas Cage this shit. What was your favorite Nicolas Cage part?
Stealing the Declaration of Independence. Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong.
Wrong movie.
Wrong movie series.
Wrong franchise.
When he switched faces with John Travolta.
When he was screaming out of the pyre of the effigy or whatnot, that was awesome.
My favorite.
When
Sorry, go ahead.
I was also going to mention about when he punched that girl in the face repeatedly.
My favorite Nicolas Cage moment from this movie has to be when Teddy's walking through the hotel. They know where he's at. They're walking through the hotel, and they just walk into this giant room with blood bags fucking everywhere. They're all empty. And you see kind of Dracula there. I love the setup of this room specifically, and just the energy that everybody put into this specific scene. Like, it was creepy as fuck, and I'm here for that.
Catherine.
To go like off of that like literally they were expecting just to get their drugs back. They walk in, there are dead bodies everywhere in all different stages of decay. And also the fact that like Dracula left him for last. He left Teddy for last because he knew like, who are you?
Right.
Oh my god. But then also like the big reveal for me was when they showed up and Teddy and a bunch of the other henchmen were all made into ghouls. And I was like, "Oh, like that hit." I was like, "Oh fuck." Like that like definitely showed that like Dracula knew like, "Oh, like I don't have Renfield anymore." Like that's done.
Mhm.
I'm preparing for war here.
Oh yeah.
Also, like nuns, a bus full of cheerleaders.
It's just like, really? Slight breaking of the fourth wall there for a sec. Marley.
I honestly, my favorite Nicolas Cage moment in the movie
Mhm.
is when he is talking to the cop and he is trying to win her over. Because my favorite part of vampires is the romance aspect. It is the how do they reach that part of your soul that no human ever could? Like, how do they see so deep? How do they know? Like, they were human once too, but do you really gain that much over that many years to understand how to read someone so deeply? Or are we really just such carnal beings that we're easy to guess? And the way that he goes about like digging into those moments that you know exactly where her head is. I love the fact that she didn't fall for it. I
Yeah.
love the fact that I can compare that to like all the other movies that we've seen where, there's that romance aspect and like how does the vampire really capture them? And even when they're playing over the top, like the way he did it, he toned it down to reach her on a level that was very specific to where her emotions were in that moment. And that is what makes it my favorite part.
Ocean.
So my favorite Nicolas Cage part actually happens to be when he steps into the abuse anonymous kind of scenario, and he's talking about himself. Some people call me the Count. Some people call me the Prince of Death. Ooh. And his whole attitude about the entire thing was absolutely over the top, narcissistic to a T. And you can look at the confusion on everybody else's face but his. It's just like, the heck is this guy? And then he's like, I'm Dracula. And they're like, are you though? It's like, oh, you're Renfield's. He's like, how dare you call me something before my own title? His whole over the top shtick has always been a very Nicolas Cage signature move. And I think that we've seen him play in like so many other movies, like the priest outfit that he was at one point where he's rocking around, rocking out to church hymns and all that. And I can't help but you can't help but love the cliche, over the top, again, the theater aspect of it. And the idea behind that scene particular though was just, in this day and age when you get told something so public knowledge and public domain, pretty much with Dracula and how it's been in stories so often, just to, does this guy really think he is? It's almost that disbelief. And then when he shows it, everybody's shocked, and everybody's running, and it depicted just the diversified understanding that there's people that think he is just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs until he proves it. He could tell you who he is, and not a single person would believe you.
I'm sorry, I will forever go back to that line of I'm Teddy fucking Lobo. I'm Count Dracula. You win.
And that's when, after he like lifted him off his feet and everything. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to ratings. Scale of 1 to 5. Do you think it held up to vampire lore? How campy do you think it was, and would you recommend it to somebody else? Let's start with Marley.
Oh, yes. Okay. So they are very good about doing the lore in the most campy way. So that is two in the same category, and definitely I would say it's 5 out of 5 for me because they hit levels. They didn't do some things that I expected, but they did hit things like the mist and different powers, and the way that the ghouls were created and the way that they just naturally, like when he says master and he doesn't mean to, like things like that really stand out because that is the effect of the vampire. He is your master once you are ghouled. And whether you like it or not, you're going to submit to that because they have that power. And things like that are very, very much in the lore. Campy, we already know it's campy. Most of this entire episode is us talking about how campy and silly this is. So it is. So yes, I definitely recommend it. It is good for a laugh, but it also has some really good points. It's up there with Johnny Depp films for me because like they're all very over the top, they're all very hilarious, and sometimes you have to have your brain out of the box to get the joke,
Yeah.
which is great if you're neurodivergent. And I feel like that really reached out to a lot of us.
Oh yeah.
So,
Wait,
yes,
oh, nobody here's neurodivergent. What the hell are you talking about? Moving
I'm
on.
going to see myself out. Thank you.
Moving on. Catherine.
It's a 5 out of 5. All categories. 5 out of 5. Loved it.
That it?
I'm feeling short and sweet and to the point today.
That's fair. Ocean.
5 out of 5 across the board.
Ocean.
Lore wise, yeah, it hits as a 4. It does. It hits all the necessities, but it didn't go into full details with everything. Like, it didn't go into the silver, it didn't go into the reflections as much. It didn't hit everywhere. It hit the main points that this is a vampire. It definitely said there's no way it can't be anything other than Dracula. Um, I got kind of like where they kind of fudged that fire that sunlight, just burns and doesn't kill. Like he was in that sun for a while, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? He was in there for like what should have been long enough to have him just pile of ash. But, you know, I get it. It works for what it is. Campiness over the top. This is a 20 out of 10 out of 5. So a million probably at this point with
20 out of
my calculus. You know how it goes with all those formula, quadratic equations and whatnot.
20 out of 10 out of
Uh,
5. I'm going to have to remember that.
um, would I recommend it? Yes, I would. I would absolutely recommend this to other people. Um, Definitely over the age of 13 and up, because this is definitely a movie that is meant for people who understand the context, who has kind of comprehension, and yeah, it's going to be entertaining for the kids at 13. I would not recommend it any younger than that, mainly because of the fact that maturity varies. Um, but yeah, this is definitely one of those you can watch with your, teen kids and whatnot and get a laugh out of it as well. It is a classic Nicolas Cage movie.
I think for me, this movie gets a 4 out of 5. I'm very hard pressed to hand out like 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
4 out of 5 for me. The humor hit just, it hit in a way that not a lot of movies can, especially with the humor. The humor was extremely well placed. They knew when to break the fourth wall. They knew when to crack a joke, and they knew when to take themselves seriously. And they played straight into that.
Oh, yeah.
I have some issues as far as the lore goes, which I think has already been kind of talked about and picked to death here. But I love the energy of it. I love the costume. I love the practical effects. I love the makeup job they did. I love the sets that they had, especially that one set in the hotel. I'm not gonna lie, I'd like to be able to replicate that, but that's probably not gonna happen. I'd have to do massive study on that. Just 4 out of 5 for me.
Now, here's something that I have a question for in regards to, is this a classic vampire movie, or is this something else?
Oh, let's start with Marley.
This is definitely something else. It has enough pieces of what we expect of vampire movies, but the perspective is what makes it so different because it is coming from the side of Dracula being the villain, the true villain, a villain you don't want to like, a villain that you don't want to fall for. It comes from the perspective of the human bringing the heart to the movie and helping a ghoul to find that part of themselves. That is very opposite traditional vampire movies. Even if the vampire's a villain in a vampire movie, there is still that amazing like romance that we talked about before. There's the everyone except for, Helsing is gonna fall for Dracula one way or another. In this one, they said, no, you're not manipulating us. So it is a completely new genre where they stood against him.
Oh yeah.
Catherine.
It's a whole new world. It's a whole modern genre, and like usually it's, yeah, the humans band together to defeat the monster, but it's like it's a whole new thing, and I love it. And it's also like are they gonna be like buddy cops now, going on to like monster hunt
I
and
would
like
pay.
take down the mafia?
I would pay money to watch that. Just saying.
Oh yeah.
And like Teddy Lago,
Lobo.
Teddy Lobo didn't die. Neither did the mom. They ran out of there as fast as they could.
I think they got arrested, didn't they?
Yeah, they got arrested.
Yeah.
But like
Love.
the mom was like, until next time. But like you don't know who they still have on their payroll.
You don't know who they're gonna get to lie for them.
So this opens up a whole new world.
Ocean.
So yeah, this is definitely not a vampire movie. This is a ghoul movie. It has been, always has been. It does hit on elements of the original source media with from the perspective of a human going up against a vampire in the original. This is almost like a sequel to it, where Renfield is that sequel where he comes back and he is still under Dracula's control. It absolutely pulls in, like I said, two different worlds that he's being pulled to and from: the humanity and the monster, the humanity and monster aspect. And what he's really trying to do, he's trying to make best of both worlds, and he eventually has to lose one of them. And I think that's what it comes down to in a lot of ways. One that actually has him surviving. He took up this, he was given this ability to become a ghoul, and he was not given the full facts of being a ghoul and what that is. And so he had to just deal with it and the abuse and everything, the toxicity. That, and also just, you see it also with the humanity side. You're not part of us because of the fact you are a monster. You do these monstrous things for your master. You are not human, that kind of thing. So it goes both ways. There is toxicity in both. So the perspective of this movie being a strictly classic vampire movie, no, it's not. It absolutely is something else. And I think that's what drives its uniqueness and ability to be amazing.
I don't think there's anything else I can add, honestly, that hasn't already been said about that. I do believe that this is very much the potential opening of a new genre, and I'd like to see this genre continue on. I'd like to see this take continue on. I'd like to see this done with other mythos and other lores, but I don't know if they can replicate what happened with this movie. I think this movie might have been a one-off in that respect. Each other movie that takes place that goes in this direction is going to have to find its own footing. I think it will always be compared back to this specific movie. Other than that, guys, I got nothing else. How about you?
I think we've
Okay.
quite
Yep, we
literally,
good.
yeah, we've quite literally picked this movie apart, put it back together, deconstructed and reconstructed, reconstituted and dehydrated it.
Well, on that note, for this episode of Masquerade Breach, I'm Blazewing.
I'm Catherine Cosplays.
I'm Marley.
And I motion.
And remember, don't tell the Camarilla we don't need any more narcissistic abusers.